Hello, I'm Janine Turner, founder of Constituting America. I and Kathy Gillespie, Constituting America's CEO, would like to welcome you to our 13th annual 90-day study. 90 plus 90 equals 180. History holds the key to the future. This year's study is on America's founding principles, the first principles of the American founding. Today is Essay 10, and we would like to thank Amanda Hughes for orchestrating these fabulous studies. Essay 10, Principle of Appropriate Role and Purpose of Government in Protecting Liberty of the Citizenry and the Function of Running Their Own Government. Guest essayist is Andrew Langer. Since the earliest days of the American founding, a bedrock principle of our republic has been the concept that government is an essential element in protecting and preserving individual rights. In the Declaration of Independence, principal author Thomas Jefferson wrote, quote, "To secure rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed," end quote. Building on this precept, in Federalist 51, James Madison talked about the tension between the necessity of government in protecting individual rights, but the need for the governed to work to constrain the powers of government. Quote, "If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. In framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, the great difficulty lies in this. You must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place, oblige it to control itself." End quote. Our republic is built on a simple yet powerful concept. We are endowed by our Creator with certain, quote, unalienable rights, end quote. We cede small measures of those rights to government in the form of powers in order for the full measure of our rights to be protected. This leads to a fundamental axiom. Whenever government is enlarged, individual rights are diminished. You cannot reconcile liberty with anti-liberty. This gives us not only the basic structure of the federal constitution, but most state-based constitutions as well. The articles of the Constitution lay out the powers of government. Example, what measures of rights we have ceded to the government in the form of powers. The first 8 amendments within the Bill of Rights represent further constraints on those powers in order to protect individual rights. But then the last 2 amendments in the Bill of Rights, Amendments 9 and 10, make further declarations regarding the balancing of rights versus the power of government. The 9th Amendment makes it clear that the rights of citizens aren't limited to what is enumerated in the Bill of Rights, that their rights are essentially infinite. While the 10th Amendment underscores the idea that the powers of government are created by the people giving up some measure of their rights, and anything not delegated to the government is reserved by the people. Further, while a New Deal-era Supreme Court dismissed limitations on federal power in cases like U.S. versus Darby, even that court had to admit that when it comes to the 10th Amendment, it states, quote, "a truism that all is retained which has not been surrendered," end quote. U.S. versus Darby, 312 U.S. 100, 124 in 1941. This tension underscores the fundamental beauty of our system. We are not a pure democracy, something our founders were rightly skeptical of. As the saying goes, quote, "democracy is 2 wolves and a sheep deciding what to have for supper," end quote. We recognize that while the people can vote to make particular laws, those laws can only exist within the powers the people have delegated to government, and they cannot be violated of the rights retained by the people. So while one group of people, even a majority of the people, might demand that government impose restrictions on certain kinds of unpopular speech, the First Amendment makes it clear that such restrictions would be unconstitutional. And one can say that the entire purpose of the First Amendment is to protect unpopular speech. Popular speech requires no such protection. How then do we assess this balance between the rights of people and the powers of government? It starts with this basic inquiry. All just law is born out of the intersection of the exercise of individual rights. One's right to wave their hands around in a wild interpretive dance, the right to free expression, is limited the moment those hands cross the bridge of someone else's nose or violate their right to be secure in their person, free from harm. And when those rights come into conflict, it is the party that is more aggrieved that the law is supposed to protect. And the law is supposed to be more weighted on behalf of those less able to advocate for themselves. This presents our society with the need for, quote, balancing tests, end quote, to determine where that line ought to be drawn. How is the right to free speech balanced against someone's right to now be lied about, a harm to their reputation? Or how is someone's right not to be harmed by government's force balanced against the rights in a community to not be harmed by that person's violent actions? When the public, either through legislation or via the courts, calls for a new law, a new balancing test, the Supreme Court has made it clear that such laws, such decisions need to be made in a way to be, quote, least restrictive way of achieving the government's goals. This way, the rights of the individual are still protected to the maximum extent possible. While there remains considerable debate as to whether such balancing tests are a good thing, or whether there is harm in the long run from a series of ad hoc inquiries into that balance, in the end, it is important to remember that the Constitution sets out essential bedrock principles in that regard. All that is not surrendered is retained. And we should remain vigilant each and every time we look to enlarge the power of government. Andrew Langer is president of the Institute for Liberty, as well as the chairman and founder of the Institute for Regulatory Analysis and Enlargement. Have a wonderful day. I thank you for joining us. Please spread the word about these awesome studies and this particular one on American principles through social media or any forum in which you communicate. And don't forget to check out last year's study on American exceptionalism explained, defined, revealed, exposed, whatever word you want to choose. We talk about American exceptionalism and what it really means. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you tomorrow or talk with you tomorrow for Essay 11.